So it watches, it gathers all of the information of how all of the systems work, and just like the presentation you just watched, right down to the disable buttons. It will go through every single protocol, and it will make sure that it has protocols in place to disable humans from disabling it.
Stuxnet was also disrupting power feeds, causing centrifuges to explode. And once the equipment started to fail, there was no way to stop it. Even those big red buttons you see on machines that you hit in case of emergency, those were disabled too. Somehow Stuxnet thought of everything.
This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it. Dave, this conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.
Al? 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 Al?
And even worse, this isn't the only version of it. There are multiple versions created by multiple nations, and that's not even counting the independent hackers, the mercenaries who sell their talents to do this thing for individuals or a corporation or a group of activists, a terrorist group. And like I just showed you, we have records that there are dozens already that have been identified. That's just what's declassified, that have been going around taking out industries all over the world, dating back to the Obama administration. So it's not any stretch of the imagination that here the vice president under the Obama administration, which is the same administration, now under the Biden administration, we see the reemergence of this same type of cyber attack. Basically, they're saying it was just an update gone wrong, but we're not stupid. It's got to make you wonder, is this technology responsible for all of these manufacturing and food production and all of these different types of factories that are going up in flames? Because they're not accusing people of arson, starting them by arson. They're just saying that these are equipment failures, exactly like what happened in Iran. They didn't target the centrifuges in Iran by doing a cyber polygon and taking out the whole world. No, they just took out what they wanted to take out. And we've seen that. Whether it was the hydroxychloroquine plants before they launched COVID, and they wanted to force us into one avenue of thinking, injections, that there weren't any other options for us. And then we have all of the factories and the food production going up. Then we just had back-to-back 2 pool chemical explosions. One was on September 25th of 2024 in Texas, and just a few days later, on September 29th of 2024 in Georgia. So clearly there must be some pool chemical, like maybe something to purify water. If they're going to release a microbe into the water supply or something, they don't want us having easy access to the chlorine chemicals that we might need to purify water. I don't know, but it has to make you wonder, right? Is this the same technology that they've been using in all these other countries to take out specific industries over the last, over a decade? And now we're seeing it happen here. Has it already begun? Now think about this. It's not just infrastructure and supply chains. Israel claims that it is the AI that has been running their bombing campaigns. In fact, when those teenage boys got blown up by the drones and chased down, and the humanitarian aid workers, that was the excuse that Israel gave. They said, we didn't launch those bombs, the AI did that. And they just sort of pushed out the narrative, hey, mistakes happen in war. I mean, here's the Israeli Defense Force. I want to be very clear, the strike was not carried out with the intention of harming the aid workers. It was a mistake that followed a misidentification, blah, blah, blah. And then here, The Guardian confirms that the IDF uses AI to generate bombing targets in Gaza at an unprecedented rate, powering a, quote, mass assassination factory, in which the, quote, emphasis is on quantity and not quality. So at this point in world history and World War III, it is not conspiracy theory or sensationalism to shock you or anything to say that the AI is targeting people, that there are targeted individuals. But I just don't think people are ready for what's happening. I don't think they have any idea how diabolical and thorough the beast system is. This Antichrist regime, it is a formidable enemy. And like we saw with Israel using all of the pagers and handheld devices, just exploding wireless devices everywhere, 2,800 people injured as handheld devices and pagers exploded all across Lebanon. 8 more were killed, including a child. That was on, September 17th. And then the very next day, a second wave of handheld radios and communication devices exploded. So think about that. You don't have to be in a war zone to be targeted. And they don't have to use military drones to do it. How many devices do you have in your house that could be used as bombs? How many devices do you have in your house that they could just burn your house down like they did those manufacturing plants all over the United States? Can the AI do that? Lithium batteries are exploding all over the world. Is it really random? Is it? I don't know who these people are. I don't know where they work, what their connections are, what they might have been involved in, if they were targeted. I don't know. Could be random, stuff malfunctions. I get that. But we'd be naive to think that it couldn't be weaponized.
One man claims that Apple's latest wireless headphones may be at risk of exploding. The Florida man says he was wearing the Apple AirPods at the gym when they blew up. He says he noticed smoke coming out of the headphones, so he took them off. He went to call for help, but by the time he came back, he says that the headphones were in pieces.
I don't know what would have happened in my ear. It was the craziest thing I've ever went through.
Apple says it is now investigating the claims.
These pictures of a passenger's injuries have been released as a warning about the potential risks of using battery-powered devices on aircraft. The woman's headphones caught fire as she was listening to music on a recent flight from Beijing to Melbourne. She was sleeping but woke up to a loud explosion. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau believes the batteries in the device likely caught fire and has urged passengers to respect safety guidelines when flying.
In a tragic incident, a 28-year-old man died after his Bluetooth headphone device exploded reportedly. The incident occurred in Udaipuria village of Chumudaun in Jaipur district on Friday when Rakesh Kumar Nakar was preparing for a competitive examination at his residence. According to officials, he was using the Bluetooth headphone device while it was plugged into an electrical outlet. He was then rushed to a private hospital where he succumbed during treatment.
Andy, when you look at these pictures, 1 minute the busy mom wearing these brand new Bluetooth earphones from Vivitar, and the next minute they exploded into flames right here. Here are the charred remains of what's left of those earphones tonight, and this whole thing left her with second-degree burns, which are still healing right now. And tonight, she has a warning for you.
Milk was cleaning her Plant City home when out of nowhere
they weren't plugged in, and all of a sudden they exploded.
Melissa says the plastic casing shot clear across the room.
All right, here's our top 6 Tesla fires, starting with a Tesla Model S. This is in Shanghai, China, in a parking garage. And here we have another Model S, this time on an Austrian highway. I'm not sure of the origins of this video, but as you can clearly see, this one is exploding right in front of you as drivers pass by. And this time we're coming from California, where we've pretty much burned our house down. This time we have a Model X. You can see the flames shooting out from that underside of the vehicle where those lithium-ion batteries are. Anything near the vehicle will be totally destroyed. Another video from California featuring yet another Model S. And here we have our final video clip. Just another random Tesla sitting on the side of the road, doesn't appear to be wrecked or damaged, but somehow it spontaneously just ignites into flames.
Pay insufficient attention to the frightening scenario of a comprehensive cyber attack, which would bring to a complete halt to the power supply, transportation, hospital services, our society as a whole. The COVID-19 crisis would be seen in this respect as a small disturbance in comparison to a major cyber attack.
So I don't know how or when this thing is going to go down, but the world government tells us to our face that it is going to go down, and we can just look around at the policies and everything going on around us and see that they are setting up for it. They are getting everything moved into place. I know that some of you believe that this could go down before the elections, and there won't be an election. And that's why there's been a change in tone amongst the mainstream media, that they're not concerned that Kamala doesn't have a chance to win because they're already on Plan B. And that very well could happen. I don't know. Others think that they're going to wait it out and see. If it's not too big to rig, then they will try to just keep control and power and go about this a different way. And if they wait it out and Trump does end up winning, then they can still launch this thing before Inauguration Day and do the same thing, declare a state of emergency and no transition of power, and that would be, quote, constitutional in their eyes. Or even other people have theorized that they want Trump to take office so that they can blame all of this on him. Then they'll be able to say, oh, look, see, we warned you. Trump collapsed the economy and he caused this whole war, and now he's brought in martial law and all of this stuff, and they can blame it on Trump, and they can still come out looking like the heroes while they are bringing in United Nations troops and all of this stuff, still doing the same thing they want to do, world domination, a dictatorship, a worldwide dictatorship, and they come out looking like the good guys, even though they're the ones who orchestrated the whole thing. I don't know. I really don't know. Any one of those could happen. Just, be prepared, you guys. This could get really ugly when they cut off the entitlements. If the infrastructure goes down for more than 3 days, and these people who live on entitlements realize that they don't have any way to feed themselves or support themselves, it's going to get really ugly really fast. I mean, they just imported tens of millions of foreigners with the promise that the government was going to give them everything for free. They just get to live here off of our tax dollars, and we'll be their slaves, we'll work, and they're going to live in the greatest, grandest hotels in America for free. They're going to get free groceries, free childcare, free health care. So when they realize that money's done, that there isn't any magic debit card, in fact, there isn't even an ATM in the country that works, it's going to be war, which is what they want. But the real question is, who are they? Who are they who want this? They want war. They want to destroy all of this. That's all clear. But who's running this show? Are these evil humans that thought this thing up to create this AI and loose it to do all of this destruction? Or is it the other way around? Are we already in the inversion? Instead of us using AI as a tool to bring about the future that we want, has the AI been using humans as a tool to bring about the future that it wanted? And that's pretty much the twist in the last season of Westworld. That, you know, if you go back and watch the Westworld video that we talked about, how they used insects to spread this parasite into the brain of humans, and they had these towers that were controlling the humans, similar to how the UFO abductees describe that the little gray aliens are actually just drones. You know, they're not little flying helicopter drones like we think of a drone, military drones. They're humanoid styled drones, and their brain is the AI. They're like ant people. They're like hive mind. They're just avatars for the AI to do what it's doing in the world. And we're perceiving that as, oh, these are aliens from outer space. And they're really just drones. And dating all the way back to 2011 when Donald Marshall came out about the cloning labs, and he talked about the Vril Society, like the Nazi Vril Society, still working underground. He said all the way back then, as crazy as it sounded, that when they vrilled a human, that there was a neural lace, a parasitic neural lace that went into their brain, and they became drones. He said they used those terms interchangeably when they talked in the underground bases, being vrilled or being droned. They meant the same thing. So when we say they are doing all of this, destroying the earth, destroying all the infrastructure, and committing a human genocide, who are they? The Holy Bible says that our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against these principalities and powers. And it says that the battlefield is in our mind and in our flesh, and to take every thought captive and test it by the word of God, because there are other entities trying to control our thoughts. So that brings us full circle all the way back from the macro scale back down to the micro scale, because we started out this video talking about autism and augmented reality, and how this whole thing appears to be layers and layers of a cyber war. We just talked about the AI attacking the power grid and the infrastructure and corporations and everything else, but yet on a biological level, these autistic people also appear to be under a cyber attack on their own minds. That something has neural laced them into an augmented reality. So World War III, or the Battle of Armageddon, however you want to look at it, this appears to all be cyber warfare. Whether it's cyber attacks on our infrastructure, cyber polygon, whether it's cybernetics attacks on the minds of our children, or even the MK Ultra programs, and the secret space program turns out to be a cyberspace program, that this is a virtual reality form of mind control. And then we know Arizona Wilder in the first video said that they literally called the drones, the little gray aliens, cybers. And likewise, Casey, in her interview on Emma's channel, said that these kids, these nonverbal autistic kids who were part of this augmented humanity Ubermensch program, she called them cyber kids, because they had these sort of superhuman Ubermensch augmented humanity abilities, like synthetic telepathy, being able to, quote, converge with her like in a psychic manner, which is absolutely a known technology. Right here on the screen is the patent for it, which was approved. It does work. It's U.S. patent number 4877027 from 1989, if you would like to look it up yourself. And don't let it escape you that this is dated October 31st, as so many of these high technologies that used to be called, quote, black magic, are dated on these high worship occult days. And you know, occult just means hidden. And these are some of the technologies that have been hidden by the intelligence agencies, the secret societies, the mystery schools, the cult. And I don't know why they do that, why that happens, if it's just a nod to Satan, to the entity or something, a thank you, a worship. I really don't know. But it is something we see again and again and again as we research the technology patents and stuff. And even the dates that they launch these particular agendas, it all seems to revolve around these satanic holidays, stuff that the pagans and the witches and the Satanists, the dates that they celebrate. Okay, so back to this patent that relates to what Casey was saying in that interview with Emma, that these cyber kids, as she called them, are exhibiting these superhuman attributes that some people just call being psychic, and then they exhibit a convergence, a psychic convergence that some people would just call the hive mind. As she said, that he was connected in a network with these others who also had these same augmentations. And she witnessed it firsthand, that they could speak to each other telepathically, and they could speak to her telepathically. Not just him, but the other autistic children that he pointed out and introduced her to that are in this network. Now, most people in our community would call it the voice-to-skull technology. They patented it originally as a hearing system directly into the brain. The sound is induced in the head of a person by radiating the head with microwaves in the range of 100 megahertz to 10,000 megahertz that are modulated with a particular waveform. You always need a carrier wave. Each burst is made up of 10 to 20 uniformly spaced pulses grouped tightly together. The burst width is between 500 nanoseconds and 100 microseconds, and you can go and read the rest of it. And this wireless form of the voice-to-skull technology, or the synthetic telepathy, wasn't submitted as an application until 1988, but it was based on a previous patent, U.S. patent number 3629521, which was issued on December 21st of 1971. So they've had this synthetic telepathy technology at least since the 70s, which would match up with what Arizona Wilder was saying. And this is interesting, of course, that even the 1971 patent, almost 20 years earlier, was also issued on an occult holiday, the winter solstice, which we mentioned in the first part of this series, the last video, when we were talking about Elon Musk and his family, and that they were doing these launches, delivering these, quote, payloads or satellite system above us on the winter solstice. And not just him, but multiple nations at the same time. And then in the years following that patent, all through the 1990s and the early 2000s, we saw the beta tests of that technology on the unwitting masses, and it became known as electronic harassment. People were hearing voices in their mind all over the place. There were entire regions. It would happen on city blocks, it would happen in certain communities, and it would also happen to individuals, which now we call targeted individuals. So if you got on the blacklist, then they would experiment on you. They would essentially torture you with voices in your mind and electronic harassment. And nobody believed any of these people, even though the patents had been out since the 1970s and the late 1980s. And you'll see in this news clip here, they bring in a psychologist, an expert, right? And just like we talked about in the medical community, that these doctors who are not trained at all, who have zero experience, are trying to school the experienced. You got it backwards there. If you haven't studied this and you have no information, you have absolutely no education, you don't get to educate the people who are educated in all of these sciences. You need to catch up, is how that works, right? The inexperienced don't school the experienced. It's the other way around. You don't get to school us. You should listen and put your egos aside and your arrogance aside and actually listen and learn and look at the science. But instead, we have a segment of the medical community that absolutely, even when presented with the evidence, will say there's no evidence. And that's what you'll see in this clip, that on top of this marginalized community being electronically harassed and experimented on, then they bring in a mental health expert, a psychologist or psychiatrist, I forget which it was, what we'll see here in the clip, and he causes more harm to them by gaslighting them and compounding the problem and telling them, oh, there is no evidence that this is actually happening to you, even though they have binders full of the actual evidence and scientific research. He's like, oh yeah, that 4-inch binder, yeah, that's no evidence. What it looks like to me is that you're all delusional. Yeah, hundreds of people in a region that are suddenly experiencing this phenomenon. He's like, yeah, you're all just crazy. So he harms them. That's harm. That's psychological abuse. It just breaks my heart. So yeah, this is a marginalized community. It's a homosexual community that this happened to. And one of the guys says that he feels like they were targeted because of that. And I don't doubt that for a minute. There was a huge stink back in the 1980s with Dr. Fauci before. He was accused of experimenting on homosexuals back then. It started with an experimental hepatitis vaccine. And both of the locations that they administered this vaccine, the same way Bill Gates goes over to third world countries and experiments on all those little children and maims them, you know, to the tune of hundreds of thousands of paralyzed and maimed kids, to where entire countries ban him from their nation, and it's all blocked from the mainstream news. But anyway, Africa wasn't the only place that they tested the experimental hepatitis vaccine. They also tested it on a homosexual community in the United States of America. They convinced the LGBTQ whatever community back then, they didn't call it that back then, but it was the community, that they were at risk because of their sexual promiscuity and, you know, that they're highly sexually active with strangers and all sorts of stuff. So they trusted the CDC and they all just ran and jumped in line for that trial. And after that is when we had the new HIV. Then Fauci stepped in with all of these experiments with AZT and all of that, which caused the same problems we're seeing now with the COVID injections, turning off the T cells and all of that that causes acquired immune deficiencies. And there were so many doctors and families who fought Fauci back then. I just cannot even believe that he was still in power, you know, when COVID rolled around. I mean, that's why he was in power, because he's part of this crime syndicate, but just absolutely mind-blowing, because you can see here on the screen the signs. The homosexuals themselves and their families caught on and were like, hey, you're killing us. And they're still running this same program on these homosexual communities today with the monkeypox vaccine. All they had to do was broadcast, you know, the CDC, oh, you are an at-risk community, come jump in line for your brand new experimental injections. And that, look at the lines. They stood in line for hours to be experimented on. And the CDC did the same exact thing with the poor black welfare community. Remember the segments several times we've talked about Timothy Cunningham? Remember, we've mentioned him several times, his situation in different videos where it applied over the last several years. But he was a Harvard-educated director at the CDC headquarters in Atlanta, and he was in charge of these vaccine programs for the, quote, underserved. And so he was going into these poor welfare communities, these black communities, largely all black and Hispanic communities, and giving them these free vaccines, right? These free vaccine trials. And they were all getting AIDS. They were having immune deficiencies and diseases. And he started catching on. And he made the mistake of going to the government about it, going to the higher ups, his supervisors, and he came up missing. But not before they released this statement that he had had a psychotic break because he was speaking about it. And he had gone to his neighbors and he told them, he said, delete my contact information off of your phone. He knew that he had stepped into a mess. And yeah, he went missing. They found him floating in a river. So we see the same cycle over and over again, especially with them experimenting on homosexuals and like the Tuskegee experiments, experimenting on poor black communities. And so this is a good point. And the reason that I have this book up here on the screen, I just read this earlier this year. It was Jack Posobiec's book, Unhumans. And it's not exactly what it sounds like. It's not about inhumanoids or anything like that. It's about the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks and how they launched these revolutions, that they always exploit these marginalized groups. And we see that today. The leftists have weaponized those who feel disenfranchised. And that's who they use. That's who they use at these Antifa protests to burn the buildings down and stuff. You know, they're sitting in their mansions. They don't care. The people out on the street, they don't care if they kill each other. They don't care if they lay in their own feces and urine. They don't care. In every single Bolshevik revolution, which he lists every one, it's a really good book. It's not political like you would think because he is right wing. It is a good history of the situation. And they always take the disenfranchised groups and pull them all together and weaponize them and say, oh, look, it's those people's fault. You need to take all your rage out on them. And they do that every single time. And then they turn right around and end up killing all the people that they used, you know. And in this case, the leftists are using the LGBT movement. But at the end of the day, it always works out the same way. So all of the LGBTQ community who is putting all of their votes and all of their energy into this leftist, socialist, communist regime, thinking that they have their best interest at heart. No, look around. Look at the communist nations. China doesn't even allow homosexuality. Russia will throw your ass in jail for being homosexual. I mean, the communists... The Marxists, the socialists, they're not on your side. They are not on your side. And when they're done using you up and abusing you, sexually mutilating you, doing experiments on you, you'll be the first ones off to the camps. And it's the exact same way with the welfare and entitlement community. They're harvesting your ballots and wooing you to come in with all these freebies. Oh, look, we love you. We're the ones that are going to take care of you. But behind your back, they call you useless eaters, and you'll be the first to go. And if you don't believe that, that's why I put this book up on the screen. Please get this book and read it and read about world history and who these Marxists and socialists really are and how they really see you. They're just using you and manipulating you, and it's heartbreaking. So I hope that you wake up to that, and I wanted to mention that before I played this clip, because this is the perfect example. They chose a homosexual community to do this beta test on with the synthetic telepathy and the voice-to-skull technology. They tortured them and harassed them and then tried to make them think they were crazy, and told everybody else around them they were crazy. Put it on the news with their expert that, oh, they were delusional, you know? These people do not have your best interest at heart. We have a common enemy. We are not enemies. We, as the body of Christ, are not enemies of you. You need to understand that. We love you. We're trying to bring the truth to you. You need to be trusting Jesus Christ. He's the one who really loves you. Okay, I'm preaching. Anyway, here's the clip.
Hundreds of people in the valley say they are hearing voices in their heads. And those voices are being transmitted by microwave or other methods.
Well, several viewers asked us to investigate what they call electronic harassment. KMIR 6's Angela Monroe joins us now with what she's discovered. Angela.
Electronic harassment, synthetic telepathy, voice-to-skull technology. Chances are you haven't heard of these terms, but after searching the internet, I found dozens of websites dedicated to the phenomenon and several Valley residents who say they're victims.
How much more can you invade me than to go into my brain? It sounds
like somebody else is reading the book, only it's thoughts.
We're not having a group hallucination. This is actually something that's happening.
These men all live in the area, didn't know each other before the voices started, and say someone is playing mind games with them.
Mostly it's a lot of derogatory comments about whatever you're thinking about.
Only time I ever had a whole sentence, he said, "This is not about you," which just frosted me. If it's not about me, what the hell am I going through all this for?
Randall Ringer says the voices started when he was undergoing chemotherapy.
The first thing that was said was Randall Ringer. And I sat up straight and I went into the bathroom and I looked in the mirror, looked myself in the eyes, and I said, did that really happen?
Okay, I promise not to break in again during this news clip, but I wanted to point out how his symptoms of this transhumanist technology started after they started him on these big pharma chemotherapies. And I wanted to mention that more and more that is what we are seeing, that it's not just in the vaccines. Like here on the screen, if you go back to my August 3rd post about Ozempic and Wegovy, these other injectables, we are also finding the nanotechnology, the self-assembling nanotechnology in these other injectables. I'm also building files on several people who claim to have these symptoms, these transhumanist augmentation symptoms, after getting spinal injections. So things for pain management, epidurals for C-sections during birth, things like that, which is really interesting because you guys know that I mentioned that I got my autoimmune disease and everything that completely mimics all the stuff that the COVID injections gave people. I had the heart problem. I had to have the heart surgery. My glands, it went through my lymph system and my glands swelled up so fast that my family was there because I just brought the baby home from the hospital. My whole family was there. And my brother's like, I can see it growing. It's coming up that fast. These big growths on my lymph nodes on the side of my neck. I mean, it was just that fast. And all of that is medically documented, that I had to go to the emergency room multiple times. Then I had the breathing failure and I had to be put in ICU, and it was like something they had not seen, like my diaphragm had quit working. Again, with the medulla oblongata that we had talked about in previous videos, that it was a strange breathing problem like we saw with COVID. Then my heart just went crazy and would not beat right, and then I had to have the heart surgery. So it was just one thing after another. And I've always kind of blamed it on the vaccines because at the time, although I was vaccine hesitant, I still let them give me the vaccines because, they say, oh, you got to protect your baby. It's flu season, it's fall. And so I did it. And that's when all this started. But now in hindsight that I'm seeing all of these other reports and building a file on it, I had an epidural. I had the spinal block because I had a C-section. And that's when all this started with me. And after all of those things I went through, then the autoimmune disease kicked in, which I went through 5 specialists before finally somebody said, well, it's just psoriasis. Here's some steroids. And but there was a lot more to it than just psoriasis. But what was interesting was the 5th specialist, the dermatologist that they referred me to, he was about to retire. And he had been, he was an old guy. He had been in the practice 40 or 50 years. And I was talking to him about the autoimmune disease, trying to find out causes, what I could do. And he told me that after all of those years of him dealing with it, that still nobody knows the cause and that there's no cure for it. But he can give me these steroids and stuff to help manage it. But the interesting thing he said is that one of the theories is that your body goes through a trauma and then just doesn't know how to shut itself off. Like there's some mechanism that's missing. So if you go through, some sort of accident or a trauma, your body kicks into healing mode and just goes into overtime and then never shuts off, which obviously sounds sort of nonsensical. But the reason he and his colleagues in this profession came to that theory was because he said almost 100% of the people that he sees in his practice got this condition, this autoimmune disease, after being in the hospital. So instead of them putting 2 and 2 together and saying, oh my gosh, Big Pharma's doing this to people, or the hospital is injuring people. No, it never occurred to him or all of his colleagues. After decades in practice, the best they could come up with was, oh, your body just tried to heal itself and never shut off, and now it's in overdrive. But they're so programmed that they could not question Big Pharma or question the hospitals. After, like I showed you guys, the statistics are, it's the 3rd most common cause of death in the United States is medical malpractice. And yet they could not see it. And that's what I wanted to point out here, is that not only are we seeing people who have these injections and IVs and stuff suddenly come down with these symptoms, not just autoimmune disease, these guys had synthetic telepathy. So in my humble opinion, I'm building quite a file. I'm building quite a case that Big Pharma, as far as crimes against humanity, Big Pharma is absolutely in on this. And just like they knew this guy's name when they started experimenting on him. So it's sort of like the Tuskegee experiments, like the Tuskegee syphilis experiments, that the medical records of these people are being enrolled in a program. They knew his name from his medical record, I assume from his medical records, since it started when he started these treatments at the hospital. But anyway, I thought I'd throw that out there. I'll finish the clip now.
Randall Ringer says the voices started when he was undergoing chemotherapy.
The first thing that was said was Randall Ringer. And I sat up straight and I went to into the bathroom, and I looked in the mirror, looked myself in the eyes, and I said, did that really happen?
Bond says he's found more than 300 victims locally and is tracking others across the state through billboards. In Johnson Valley, a Freedom House just opened to help people who believe they are being targeted.
To many of you who find yourselves the object of covert harassment, that there is hope and that you are not alone, and that we are striving to find legislation and we're working towards freedom for all.
Derek Robinson leads a national group called Freedom from Covert Harassment and Surveillance. He says he knows who's playing mind games.
Rogue government officials that are sponsoring this, also corrupt business officials.
And he also told us how.
Most of it is delivered by microwave.
And they assign cell phone numbers to them. The cell phone numbers are then run through a computer, and a computer translates your thoughts. This crime has been available to the military for 60 years.
We sat down with local psychiatrist Dr. Alan Drucker to get his professional opinion.
There's no scientific evidence and there's no objective evidence to show that what they believe to be happening is factually true. Really confirms or is consistent with what I see in delusional disorders.
But these men disagree.
I've been to a psychiatrist and they gave me anti-schizophrenia medication and it did absolutely nothing whatsoever.
However, Dr. Drucker says delusional disorder has no real medical treatment and is believed to start because of disrupted dopamine pathways in the brain.
Okay, so you get the point. It's the same old media propaganda and silly experts that they prop up who say that there is no cure for it and they don't know what causes it. He goes on to say that it's probably triggered because nobody's talking to them. He says that. And in the absence of a radio or somebody actually talking to them, they have to fantasize these delusions that someone's talking to them.
Pathways then start to fire or get triggered in the absence of actual stimulation of a person actually speaking or the radio being on, etc.
It's unbelievable. It is so absolutely unbelievable. The mental health profession and even the medical profession are just in the Stone Age. Just absolute cavemen when it comes to science and technology. But, you know, the point of this whole thing was that there absolutely is evidence of what Casey was talking about in that interview about the autistic children. If you just watched that interview without the context of this type of technology And then you hear this lady talking about things like psychic convergence and all of that. Yeah, that's going to sound kind of crazy. And that's why we're here, is to show the science and to put all of this in context so that these people quit getting doubly harmed. They're already being harmed by these technologies, and then they're being doubly harmed by the medical community and psychiatric community because they're leading them astray, and they're telling them that there's no cure and there's no answers and they don't know what causes it and they can't fix it, but yet they're the experts. Well, there is a community of people on the earth who do know what causes this, and that's what we are here to show you. We're hoping that this information and the patents and the testimonies and the beta tests and the 4-inch binders full of research and all of our life's efforts will touch the medical community. And medical doctors and mental health professionals will be brave enough and humble enough to stand up and say, tell us more. Can we join forces? And instead of calling us alternative medicine and calling them like their mainstream medicine, let's work together, because there are answers. And these victims and these patients, they are desperate for our help. It's time for us to unify our talents and information. Okay, so that leads us to the second thing that sounded completely crazy that Casey said in that interview about these augmented autistic children. She said that they could control electronic devices with their minds using this synthetic telepathy that was starting to border on synthetic telekinesis. Now again, doesn't that sound like AI? What can link into all of these devices that are attached to the internet? AI. And it was almost like poltergeist activity, that these children were able to have a brain-computer interface with all different kinds of electronics in the house. And since they were nonverbal, their parents didn't understand. But after Casey had the convergence, the psychic convergence, where they were speaking into her mind, explaining it to her, then when she talked to the parents were like, oh my gosh, I knew it. I knew that was what was going on. And they started explaining all of these different things that had happened in their home with their electronics, that they felt like someone was trying to get them a message or something. And I get it. Out of context, that sounds woo. That sounds, ooh, paranormal. Now you're getting fringy. But in context, you can see that it's just science. Even if you just had a couple of semesters of study in the transhumanist movement and the artificial intelligence technologies, you could pick up on that. But certainly, after the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of lectures and seminars and everything that we've watched, and the decades of study that we have put in, I mean, the mystery just melts away. It's not paranormal at all. It's just technology. It's not a mystery. It makes perfect sense. There are no mysteries. That's been my thesis since the 1990s, that there are no mysteries. There are just people who can't accept the truth. So to them, everything's an anomaly, everything's a mystery, but clearly this is the exact brain-computer interface that the transhumanists have always talked about, and we see all of the scientific papers on. They've done it. I guess that's what they can't come to terms with, really. Not that the technology exists, but that there would be mad scientists. That amongst Silicon Valley and the technocracy and the military-industrial complex, that they would dare, the audacity, the hubris, that they would dare to literally roll this transhumanist program out on the whole world, the entire human race, without our consent. I think that's the mental block. I think that's the cognitive dissonance right there. They just don't want to admit to themselves what is really going on. They want to be lied to. The masses know, at some level, they know something's terribly wrong. They know when the COVID injections were forced upon us the way they were and how nothing made any sense anymore, and all of that, they know, but they want to be lied to, because this is a really scary reality. This is a hell of a reality check. It takes courage and mental fortitude to join this great awakening and admit what is really going on. When given the choice, like all of us, between the two paradigms, between the two worldviews, the choice between the secret societies, the quote mystery schools, and the truth, Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit, the way, the truth, and the life. When given the choice between those two, they choose of their own free will to reject Christ, to reject the truth, the spirit of truth, and to follow and consent to the paradigm of the mystery schools that create mysteries by withholding knowledge. And in that paradigm, by choosing to live inside a false paradigm, you're constantly going to be encountering evidence all around you that contradicts the paradigm because it is a lie. But when they encounter that evidence to the contrary, instead of going, oh my gosh, I'm living in a lie, I need to have a paradigm shift. Instead of receiving the correction, they do what the mystery schools told them to do. They create this imaginary category and they label it mysteries and anomalies. So then every time they encounter all of this evidence all around them that disproves the paradigm, the false paradigm they live in, they take it and they throw it into that category, mysteries and anomalies. Oh, and of course we can't forget, now they've added conspiracy theories to that category. So every time one of their lies gets exposed, the cult jumps up from their seats, waving their hands. It's just a conspiracy theory. It's just a conspiracy theory. These people are all crazy. It's just a conspiracy theory. Don't listen to them. Throw it in the category with the mysteries and anomalies and conspiracy theories. It's cult 101, right? Isn't that the very definition of how a cult works? They get you in, they get total control of you, and then they say, oh, if your family tries to tell you anything different than we do, or anyone else, your neighbors, anyone tries to tell you you're in a cult, it's because they are your enemy. Certainly not the cult. No, your family's your enemy. Your friends are your enemy. I know what you see with your own eyes when you catch us in all these lies doesn't match what we've told you, but just throw those into mysteries and anomalies and conspiracy theories and just do as we say and stay with us. Well, there are no mysteries. All of the confusion and chaos melts away when you make the right choice and you leave the control of these liars and thieves in these secret societies, this shadow government hiding in the shadows. You break free of their spell and you come over into Christ. You just come over. He's waiting. You don't have to earn it. It's free gift. You can just come and you can ask for the Holy Spirit and He will give it to you. He's not mad at you. He understands the human condition. He's the one who told us about the genetic contamination and the original sin that caused the fall of mankind, and how now all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and that there's no hope that in our flesh we could ever attain that level again. That the only way to reach heaven now, the only way to ascend into those higher frequency dimensions is by receiving His Holy Spirit. And He's longing for you to come home. He is your Father. He misses you. That is the story of the prodigal son. He's not waiting to spank you. He's waiting to hug you. And it's hard for us to, as humans, to really understand unconditional love because we don't see it very much in this world. But please hear me. I have experienced it, and I bear the testimony of Jesus Christ to bring you the good news that He loves you and He wants to give you this gift. All you have to do is ask Him. Luke 11:13. If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give the Holy Spirit to those who ask Him? 2 Corinthians 5:18. And all this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ, and in turn gave us the ministry of reconciliation. John 14:6. And Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. It doesn't say he knows the truth. He is the truth, the Spirit of truth. Revelation 19:10. And the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. John 16:13. But when he, the Spirit of truth, comes to you, he will guide you into all truth. Romans 8:14. For those who are led by the Spirit of God are the children of God. And that is the born-again experience. Nothing else is going to save you. You're not truly alive unless you have the Spirit of life inside you. And when you invite him into your life and into your heart and soul, it's not just some hokey saying, you are born again. You are a new creation in Christ. John 1:12-13. To all who receive him, to those who believe in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision of a husband's will, but born of God. Okay, I'm done preaching again, but there's just so many captives who still need set free. There is a famine in the land for the word of God. People are thirsty for the truth. They are starving for the truth. And that's why I wanted to preach a little, to let them know who is the Spirit of truth. That the only way you are going to find the truth and experience these epiphanies and the revelations that we are talking about in this community is by going to the Spirit of truth. And he has a name. Say his name. Jesus. Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach, is the Spirit of truth, sent from the Most High Holy God. And this is the truth that he has shared with me, and the message that he has given me to deliver, and so many others to deliver. We were talking about Casey trying to deliver this message about these autistic children, that they are reporting symptoms of synthetic telepathy and symptoms of having the ability to interface with electronic devices. And she's struggling to get any traction, and not to sound crazy, and now even harder to get traction since Emma did invite her on for an interview, and now they've taken down Emma's entire channel. But I'm going to pick up the baton, and I'm going to do my part to deliver this truth, deliver this message, that not only is this not crazy, but this is technology. The technocracy, the military-industrial complex with the DARPA projects, they have been working on the human-brain interface for a long, long time, and this is old technology. Now they have wireless connections, and these mad scientists, these people who really believe in transhumanism, the Noah Yuval Hararis, all these people who talk about the synthetic biology, they say it to your faces. Not only are they saying it, but they are doing it. And this is the evidence. These autistic children that have been linked into the quantum computer, they are the evidence. That exactly describes the paranormal activity that she was claiming went on around these children. That they could get into her phone and change her files and change her file names and do stuff like that. And we've talked about that for years, haven't we, you guys? I've shown you that my phone was going crazy. I was getting calls on my phone that were like warnings, 6666666, and then I was getting calls on my phone from my niece, and then my niece was getting calls on her phone from me, but neither one of us were calling each other. There was one week that it was insane. My dad, my brother, and my niece's husband actually came over here, guns drawn. They were all walking around the house, and I was sound asleep in bed. But they checked and cleared the perimeter, and then they came in the house. My dad has a key to my house, and they came in the house, flashlights blazing. Jan, are you okay? Jan. And I get up, I'm sound asleep, and they're like, what's going on? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm in bed asleep. My son was, back then he had visitations with his dad, and he was at his dad's, and I very rarely get to sleep, especially when he was little. I mean, being a single mom is hard work. So I'd gone to bed at like 7 o'clock at night. So I had no idea what they were talking about. They're like, you just called. Here's Adrian's phone right here. You just called 18 times in a row. I'm like, what are you? I haven't called anybody. And that stuff happened so much. See, she's the daughter of my brother who died. And like her phone will ring. One time she was coming to see us and it was on his birthday. And she was driving back to Indiana from visiting with the family. And her phone rang like on her dashboard, on her car dash, you know, because she has it all rigged up together. And it showed up Dad. And it was his number. And his phone number had been disconnected for 5 years at that point. So this stuff happens. It happens to us all the time. And I know a lot of people say, oh, it's demons, 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 demons. And then people who get these calls from dead loved ones are like, no, they're really trying to reach us from another dimension. And listen, I'm not coming to any conclusions. I'm reserving judgment. I'm just passing along my experience as a human in this dimension. And I can tell you that something or someone is indeed accessing our electronic devices. It happens all the time to my family. I just wanted to put it in context here because I thought it might open the minds of some people in the paranormal community that it doesn't have to be ghosts or even people in other dimensions. In light of this creepy technology, we have AI who can make its own phone calls as Google Assistant. We have AI who is reading our minds. I mean, we don't know behind the scenes how it is putting these commands together. Then we also have what Casey was talking about with the autistic kids, this transhumanist Übermensch program where they are putting that AI technology into the human body by biohacking us. So it's quite possible that we do have nonverbal Übermensch children who are capable of using their brainwaves to access different devices. And I'm sure all of you have noticed, if you haven't noticed, you're just not paying attention, that now everything you think of just pops up on your feed, or your advertisements, your video feed, suggestions, stuff like that. The same exact thing we went through when we found out that Facebook was listening in on our phones to tailor marketing suggestions and all of that. And for the years leading up to that, we were posting video after video of people saying, hey, look, we were just talking about this alone in our home. And then it started showing up all over our computer. And then, of course, all the tech giants admitted they were doing it. And then several years back was when I posted the first video. Have you guys noticed now it's what you're thinking starts showing up? And now it's gone to the extreme. Now it happens all the time. So I'm sure you guys are experiencing that, and I'm sure they are still denying it. I mean, they're not denying that they are doing this technology. They just talked about it at the big conference. But just like they initially tried to skirt or deny that our phones were listening to us, now they're skirting the issue that they are already reading our brainwaves. And if they're not, then the AI has gone rogue, because I'm experiencing it all the time. I'm not paranoid. I know you guys are experiencing it. But the reason I say that is because isn't it interesting that I was in REM sleep? You know, we've talked about the D-wave quantum computer and delta brain waves, which is sleep frequency. For many years, we've talked about that. So isn't it interesting that when I was in REM sleep is when my phone was calling all these people? It makes me wonder. I don't remember what I was dreaming about. It was such a shock. I was shaking when they woke me up so abruptly out of a sound sleep. I don't remember what I was dreaming about, but yeah, it makes me wonder if the AI, if I had a Google Assistant, you know, who was calling and I was dreaming about something. The same way when my niece received the phone number that was listed on her contact list under Dad, even though he had already passed away and that wasn't actually his number anymore, that she had come to visit us and it was on his birthday. So she was thinking of him. So, you know, it just makes me, it's just interesting. I don't know what it means. I just thought I'd throw it out there. It opens up a whole new universe of possibilities for all of this paranormal activity that people have been witnessing as long as I've been alive. I mean, they talk about AI or, quote, ghosts accessing toys, not just accessing devices like we talked about earlier, but accessing toys, or like the UFOs accessing cars and being able to shut them off when they come into contact with them, or control their radios or things like that. So all paranormal activity doesn't have to be, quote, ghosts. It can be AI, or it can be both, or all three, or 50 different things, which is what I think it is. All different types of symptoms of this very real expanded reality. I don't know what it is that is calling us, but I have a long history of these types of experiences. My whole family does. My parents, their phone, there was this couple of weeks that their phone started calling 911 so much that they had to disconnect their phone. And this was their landline. This was not a wireless cellular phone. This was their landline, that they've had the same phone number since I was a little bitty kid. And they ended up just deciding to shut their whole landline off and just keep their cell phones or whatever, because the police just kept showing up at their door, and they'd answer the door and they'd say, "You called 911, is everything okay?" And they're like, "We didn't call 911. And it became such a hassle, both for the police and for my parents. They just decided, I mean, what else do you do? They disconnected their entire landline. So again, when I hear a story like Casey's story, that she says these children who are in another frequency, in another dimension, are accessing her phone and stuff, why would I doubt that? I absolutely 100% know that that's true, and it's all verifiable. Like, we have the phone documents, we have the police records, we have, like, I'm not making this stuff up. So why would I doubt Casey? And I just wanted to tell some of these stories in the light of what we are discussing here. And I'd like you to keep this in mind when I play these interviews in the next segment, the interviews with the autistic people, the autistic man, Benjamin Brody, who has been healed from autism and now can articulate and tell you exactly what he was seeing and where he was. And then two or three, I think, other what I'm calling realm walkers, people who they don't know why, but they have been linked in to these other dimensions, some artificial and some that appear to be real dimensions, that they are perceiving higher frequencies and lower frequencies. Just like a bat can perceive infrared and a dog can hear a dog whistle that is above at a higher frequency than our ears pick up, that these people aren't just linked into the virtual reality, but they are, what we've nicknamed realm walkers. And part of this augmentation, this genetic engineering or whatever has been done to them, has allowed them to be able to access electronic devices. So that's an interesting expansion on this whole concept, that you don't have to be dead to be in another dimension, calling somebody's phone or whatever. Some weird stuff. And I'm sure some people thought that Casey sounded like a crazy person saying that out loud. But isn't that strange? Because when Mark Zuckerberg says it out loud, he's a super genius. Oh, he's a billionaire super genius. But when Casey says it out loud, she's a crazy person. Why is that? So this is just from a few weeks ago at the big tech and AI conference, September 25th. So I wrote, Zuckerberg kicked off today's conference by unveiling, quote, neural interface hologram AI smart glasses to augment reality by allowing, quote, users to see AI digital objects overlaid on the real world. And a little while into the presentation, he said again, quote, and there's one more way that you'll be able to interact that's pretty neat. Neural interface. Send a signal from your brain to the device. And that's exactly what these autistic kids claim they can do. Send a signal from their brain to the device. They're saying exactly what Mark Zuckerberg is saying. So why aren't they getting the attention and the medical help that they need? That someone has put this technology that Meta is telling the whole world they're developing. We have millions of children already with this technology in their brains. And the children also said that it was causing their neurological problems, that's why they don't have motor skills anymore. that the same technology that gave them these superhuman abilities also is what is causing them not to be able to speak, not to be able to use their motor skills correctly. And that's the side effects of this neural lace, because they're messing with their neurological system. Okay, so this is where the New World Order technology links back to the Old World Order. So I want to tie this together and try to explain why I'm putting both of these in the same video. Okay, let me pause this GIF really fast and look up here at the top. See these two wavelengths that are going simultaneously? That's what is going on in this earth. There are two kingdoms simultaneously inhabiting the same space-time. We have the kingdom of heaven. That's this high frequency, right? This is the high frequency. Then we have the kingdom of hell, Tartarus, this low frequency, flatlining Tartarian empire, or the remnants of it, which the secret societies call the bloodlines, right? These are the Nephilim bloodlines, the bloodlines of the fallen angels, because it all comes down to them tuning our perceptions. Like we talked about in the very end of the Stranger Things series, how they are using the chemical nature of adrenochrome to tune human perception. How adrenochrome is an important molecule in time dilation, which literally changes your frequency. They want to be able to tune us. Like, here is our visible range, right? And pretend this is a radio dial. They want to be able to bring us down here into the infrared if they want to slow us down, slow down time, or tune us up into the higher dimensions so we are moving faster, which makes everything around us appear to be moving slower, which is what happens during adrenaline rushes. But it is also what these autistic children are reporting, that they are being tuned back and forth between dimensions, between literal frequency ranges. So we're going to talk about the infrared ranges right now and how that plays into the Gothic eras, what we are calling the Dark Ages, and what was really going on in the Dark Ages that they are hiding from us. And why are they called the Dark Ages? Again, with the double entendres, they know all of this stuff. Okay, let's start here. Down at the bottom of this graphic, you can see we have the human spectrum, visible spectrum, and then we have a dog's perceivable spectrum. So like we mentioned earlier, dogs can perceive higher audible sounds than humans can, so they are perceiving higher dimensions that we have no perception of. Likewise, bats see in infrared, and other creatures see in infrared, so they are perceiving lower dimensions that are invisible to us. So here is where science goes off the rails. This is one of those foundational assumptions that I was talking about in the first video that we have to overcome to move forward, to understand reality. Because of the egocentric view from the modern scientific community anyway, they always say things like, oh, dogs just see in black and white, because they're in this evolution mindset that we are better than them, not that we are different than them, that we're on a different spectrum, we're in a different frequency range. They're just like, oh, well, look, their rods and cones and their eyes are different, so they just see in black and white, and we're the pinnacle of, whatever. But that's completely wrong. The way God's multiverse is structured is that all of the creatures of the earth are basically living in different worlds. We all have our own frequency range, right? So all of the subsets of octaves are organized into kingdoms. So we'll have the mineral kingdom, which is the really dense, slow-moving, really dense kingdom. Then we have the plant kingdom layered on top of that, which is a faster-moving kingdom, but is still overlaid onto the mineral kingdom, the underworld, and in fact is tethered to it. Then on top of this, we have the animal kingdom, which is layered on top of both the mineral kingdom and the plant kingdom, and it perceives both. We perceive both of these kingdoms and interact with them. So we are perceiving these three dimensions of reality as one world, because that's our perception, our 3D perception. But we are also having perceptions of kingdoms both above and below. So these are what we would call the religious experiences, right, of the celestial kingdom, which is a higher kingdom, which is not somewhere off in another earth, another orb somewhere. It's not up in the sky, up in space, outer space or something. It's layered right on top of us. We just don't perceive it. Now, it can perceive us because we are moving slower. We're in a lower frequency. So we are part of their world. Just like the Bible teaches us in Hebrews about the humans, that we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. And a lot of people now call them guardian angels and things like that. In the ancient texts, or going back to the Dark Ages and the medieval texts, it talked about humans being able to, humans who had received the Holy Spirit, that they had such an expanded perception that they were working on the earth with angels. And some of this architecture that we're going to look at from the Old World Order that people are struggling with, how did humans build this? The texts from that era say that humans didn't build it alone, that humans worked with angels, and the angels helped build it. And those are not isolated records. The entire record of human history shows that, a progression of us less and less and less interaction with the angelic realms. People who read the Bible today, they act like it just stopped overnight. Like in Adam's era, they were walking and talking with God. They had access to the full reality. And then, boom, now we have the Bible and there never are any angels. There's no supernatural experiences. Like none of that existed since Adam's time. But that's not what the archaeological record shows, and that's not what the Bible reads. The Bible says, like here, we have around 2000 to 2300 BC was the era of Abraham and Lot, and they still had communication with angels. Angels went to Lot's house. Angels interacted with Abraham multiple times. Then you move forward in history during the time of Daniel, and he was dealing on both sides with the Babylonian Empire, with the descendants of the fallen angels ruling over them. The Bible records in Daniel 10:13, the angel came to Daniel and said, "Do not be afraid, Daniel, for from the first day that you purposed to understand and to humble yourself before God, your words were heard, and I've come in response to them. However, the prince of the kingdom of Persia opposed me for 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me." So still at that time, 400 or 500 years before Jesus came and split the timeline, in Daniel's time, there were humans on the earth, Daniel, and there were still angels working with them, and fallen angels. Because the archangel Michael, a chief prince, which means archangel, was fighting a prince, an angel, over Persia. Then jump forward to the time of the birth of Jesus, which was only 400 or 500 years later, and there were angels interacting with humans everywhere. Angels and humans were part of one kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, working together for one joint mission on the earth. For example, God sent an angel to Mary to let her know what was about to happen. In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God to a city of Galilee named Nazareth, and that's when he told Mary. Then he also sent an angel to Joseph and warned him to flee, get his family, and get out of there when they were going to commit the genocide for all of the children under 2 years old. Then we had the angels appearing to the shepherds in the field at Jesus' birth. It says, now there were it'll be in Matthew 2 and Luke 2. Now there were in the same country shepherds living out in the fields, keeping watch over their flock by night. And behold, an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were greatly afraid. Then the angel said to them, do not be afraid, for behold, I bring to you good tidings of great joy, which will be to all people, and announced the birth of Christ. Verse 15, when the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about. And then we have the archaeological finds, which are bound together as the New Testament, the letters from the apostles as they went out throughout the whole world and spread the gospel and imparted the Holy Spirit, and Christianity swept over the world. Then we have a whole archive of history of the Middle Ages. But the mainstream has convinced us that it's just mythology, just like they did the pre-flood, the antediluvian world. They tell us all of the historical records left by our ancestors of that era are also mythology, because they are so close-minded and self-centered that they subjugate. I just can't even believe we lift these people up as, quote, scholars, that they subjugate all of the archaeology and historical records left by our ancestors to their selves. They're like, well, I can't see in this frequency, so all of these records, I'm just going to throw them all away. I'm going to toss them into that imaginary category that these are just, oh, I should add that, mysteries, anomalies, conspiracy theories, and mythology. Add that to the category where they just will not do real science, where they take all of the information and data into consideration to form a scientific hypothesis. So they've done the same thing after Christ. Then 500 years later, they've just created this, what they call the Dark Ages. Then the Dark Ages started. But there's this entire record of what was going on during that time. And that is all of the records of these two kingdoms fighting. So you have the old world order fighting with the saints of God. You have the Knights of the Round Table stories. You have saints slaying dragons, remnants of these, what they are calling dinosaurs that might be found. There's one that still exists in a cave or in Loch Ness or something. And how the people who lived in those regions were terrorized by it. They had to make offerings to it, like demonic sacrifices to these dragons. They would have to give them livestock. And if they didn't continually feed them and give them livestock, then they would come after the humans and steal children and stuff to eat. So we have legends of that type of stuff here in Alton, Illinois. We have the Piasa creature that was a flying creature who lived in a giant, they found a nest of bones. It was stealing people from the Native American tribes. So these are things that really existed. They'll say, oh, look at all these dinosaur bones in the museum. But then they have the records of this stuff and they're like, oh, but that's impossible. Okay, whatever. The point is that there wasn't a dark age that they just don't have much information on. It's that they have all of this information and they throw it away and then say, we don't have any records of that era. Even though when you see these accounts of things like take Knights of the Round Table, we obviously know that the Knights Templar and all of these different groups were real and functioning during that time. Then when you fast forward a few hundred years to, say, the early 1900s, World War II here, you can see the continuation of these groups who still are having these gatherings like Knights of the Round Table. The problem is that none of this real history fits their lie about evolution. They can't have this in their history books, talking about people with superhuman powers who were full of the Holy Spirit going about doing miracles. Even though those of us who still hold on to those records in Christianity about the miracles done by Jesus Christ and by the apostles, and we know that those were factual things, and not just because it was recorded in the Holy Bible, but because it was recorded by the pagans. Even Josephus, one of the most reliable historians of that era, and everything else, that's the thing, everything else these historians wrote and recorded is accepted as factual history, right? And taught in the universities and colleges all over the world. Josephus, Tacitus, Pliny the Younger, this was a governor in Asia Minor. These were real historians. The historians in the Bible, those are archaeological finds as well that were just bound together by people who were like, hey, this is all telling the same story. Here's these confirm one another and bound them together. It wasn't written by a religious leader. It was written by historians in every era of history. But in addition to those that have been bound together, all of these other historians record the life of Jesus. But their histories are taken as solid fact and cited by every intellectual on the earth until you get to their records about Jesus. Then all of a sudden, you can't teach that in schools. Separation of church and state. That's religious. You can't teach religion in schools, but it's not a religion. This is real world history. Josephus recorded all the things that were going on at the time around Jesus, even. John the Baptist, he talked about James, the brother of Jesus. He even recorded the crucifixion and that Jesus came back to life. He wrote that as historical fact. But you can teach everything else he recorded in school, but you can't teach that in school. Hopefully you're getting the picture. It's a lot easier now that we see open censorship on the internet and social media, and we see that there are certain narratives we're not allowed to talk about. Now, when you would try to tell this story I'm telling right now, back when I first started this 20 years ago, people were like, blah, blah, blah. But now they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, they really do censor history. This isn't religion. They told us it was religion because they wanted to scrub it from the historical record. The anti-Christian people on the earth, the Antichrist wants to hide these records. They don't want us to know about that. They certainly don't want us to know about the realm shifting, which has been a common ability of these angels, the celestial beings, the kingdom above the animal kingdom. It has been recorded back in the antediluvian world. It has been recorded in the Dark Ages, in the, quote, Christian mythology. It's common for them to say that they descended into the underworld, so they were changing frequency into those lower frequency realms, and that they could ascend to heaven before the throne of God, and back and forth, and back and forth. And Wikipedia documents that, even though it's anti-Christ and says, it's just all mythology to them. But it does say the cosmology of the New Testament is essentially, quote, mythical in character. The world is viewed as a 3-storied structure with the earth in the center, the heaven above, and the underworld beneath. So it's like I was saying about the mineral kingdom, plant kingdom, animal kingdom. And when we get to the interviews with these people who still have these genetic abilities or have been reintroduced to these genetic abilities, this 3D reality really is like Middle Earth, like in Lord of the Rings. And there's a reason for that. Because Tolkien wasn't just a great fantasy writer, he was a philologist, which is the study of language in oral and written historical sources. So he was an expert. He was actually called to work and translate new archaeological finds that they didn't have, translations for yet, and that he could figure out the etymology, the word origins of them. And he actually worked on texts that talked about this race of dwarves and stuff, and they say that's probably where he got some of the ideas for the realms of Middle Earth. And notice that he used the word realms often, because when he was translating these historical texts, that's what he found. It wasn't just about region. It was within those regions, these races were in different realms, although all part of Middle Earth, being in the middle of a larger expanse of the world of reality. And how that exactly matches the Christian records of the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages that they called Christian mythology that I just read you. And then it also exactly matches the pagan records. Like here on the screen, we have Norse mythology, and it's called Midgard, which is Middle Earth. And then you have Alfheim and Asgard as the second heaven and third heaven above. And then you actually have hell. They actually call it hell in the underworld dimension below. But like I always point out, that the pagan religions and the Holy Bible are telling the same exact story, just from 2 different perspectives. The fallen angels are the pagan gods of the Norse mythology. So they know how the realms work. They have information. They have knowledge. There's no denying that. But they are telling their story. Like their prophecies, Ragnarok, say that they can't be saved, that no matter how many wars and how much they tried, the prophecy is that those gods will be destroyed. But our prophecies tell the other side of the story from the perspective of the victor, that the Most High Holy God cannot be overthrown, that he is God, and that his judgment will stand, and that his Son will reign over all the realms and be seated at his right hand. So I've studied long and hard, like the Bible says, study to show yourself approved, and I've studied my life away. I have studied. I feel pretty confident about my presentation, what I'm going to say about the dimensions and the realms, what the Lord has shown me. What I don't know about this is if this tree, the tree of the world is what they call it in the Norse mythology, I don't know if this tree is the mimic of God's creation, if this is the matrix, this is the overlay of realms, or if they are talking about God's creation, the tree of life. Because, you know, it says in the Bible, it records there are two trees in the garden. And we know that, right? There's real reality and there's the matrix. And the Gnostic texts and the Nag Hammadi and all of those ancient texts talk about this degraded copy, the degraded copy of creation, of reality. So I don't know if the Norse mythology tree of the realms, if that is the matrix, that's, you know, the tree of the knowledge of evil, or if it is just the fallen angels having a remembrance and discussing the tree of life. The central structure, or the axis mundi is what they call it, which is the temple at the center of time, which ties into what I want to talk about. The temple in Jerusalem, I keep alluding to in the last video, is starting to look like, I'm not even going to get to it in this part. This is going to be about 5 hours probably, and I'm going to have to do a part 3 to get to that. I might throw in a little bit of the timeline stuff because it really does play in to these realm walker testimonies. Anyway, we all agree on the basic structure of the realms. But I definitely wanted to mention the old world Norse mythology because that's where the Germanic ideas that we saw, the whole Aryan race thing, all of that doesn't seem to make any sense. It all comes from this old Norse mythology. That's the old world history. This is the history that they believe in, the Germanic peoples that come from the Rhine River region. See, here's the map of the Rhine River region, and which plays in even to Donald Trump's family. Hopefully we'll get to that by the end of this video. But like we talked about in last video, it also relates to all the Bohemian Grove and the Black Forest and Disney, the Bavarian Illuminati, and what we're getting ready to talk about with the realms and this like almost Halloween hellish looking Gothic architecture that is left on the earth for us to see. They say all roads lead to Rome, but not in my opinion. Everything I have found leads through this Germanic tribes and this Norse mythology and the fallen angels. In the communities that research the alien abductions and UFO phenomena, Nordics, right? They report Nordics, but they call them aliens. Aliens from the Galactic Federation or whatever they call them. But they're Nordics. And that's what the Norse gods were, right? That we're talking about the same thing, whether you call them aliens from outer space or whether you call them like the Nazi did, the Aryan superhumans. They're talking about the same thing. They're not aliens from outer space. The Nordic aliens or the Aryan superhumans are the demigods, the Nephilim descendants of the fallen angels recorded in Norse mythology. But anyway, the main thing I wanted to point out about the underworld is that I'm not just talking about Hollow Earth. I'm not just talking about underground, because I know we talk a lot about the tunnels, and there are tunnels like in this layer, like the outer layer. Yes, there is an underground. But when I'm talking about the underworld, I'm talking about the realm. Once you get even more dense, because the worlds are layered by density. And so when you get down to even more dense matter, it's not a place you can go by physically drilling. Like, it's impossible. There's a frequency barrier here, a dimensional barrier. So you would have to leave this dimension and enter another dimension. You can't just go into this density without you yourself changing density. So we're talking about interdimensional travel, basically, is what I'm saying. This is a different dimension. And as weird as it is, the best analogy I can think of is the way they presented it in the King Kong movie or Godzilla vs. Kong movie a few years back, when they took King Kong back to the Hollow Earth, back into the Hollow Earth, to his world. Well, he didn't just crawl in a hole to get there or crawl into a tunnel to get there. He did that. He went into the tunnel, into the hole, but then they crossed a dimensional barrier and they went into another dimension, and that was the realm inside the earth.
Prepare to launch! Everybody to their station! Gotta go. This is Eve 3 online, launching now.
And then likewise, it's the same exact thing going up. You can't just go up into outer space and reach those objects that are up there. And I'll talk about that when we get to what the rings of time are. What we are seeing are dimensions. The Van Allen belts are frequency fences. They are the dimensional barriers. So once you hit the Van Allen belts, those are dimensions. Once you hit the edge of this dimension, you're going to go into another dimension. You're not going to just be able to strap a rocket to your butt like Wile E. Coyote and, go to Mars or something. That's ridiculous. Up and down are exactly what they sound like. To go down into the underworld, you are going down in frequency. To go up into the higher realms, you are going up in frequency as well. Which is basically exactly what Admiral Richard Byrd encountered and reported during Operation High Jump.